Among all the cards in the tarot, justice is perhaps one of the most misunderstood. At first glance, it appears to speak about morality, fairness, or even punishment. We see a figure seated on a throne, holding a sword in one hand and scales in the other. It looks like a judge, someone who decides who is right and who is wrong. But from a Jungian perspective, justice is not primarily about courts, laws, or external judgment. It is about an inner psychological process. It is the archetype that asks whether we are living in alignment with our deepest nature. Justice represents the moment when the psyche demands honesty not with other people, but with ourselves. It is the point in the journey where illusions begin to lose their power and where the consequences of our choices can no longer be ignored. Carl Jung believed that the psyche naturally strives toward wholeness. This lifelong process, which he called individuation, is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming real. Along the way, we develop masks that help us survive. Jung called these masks the persona. We learn how to behave, what to say, what emotions are acceptable, and what parts of ourselves must remain hidden. These adaptations are necessary, especially in childhood, but eventually they become prisons. Justice appears when the psyche begins asking a difficult question. Are you living your own life, or are you still performing the role that was written for you? The scales held by justice do not weigh good against evil. They weigh authenticity against self-deception. The sword in justice's right hand is equally symbolic. Unlike the sword carried by warriors, this one is held upright. It does not represent violence, but discrimination. In psychology, discrimination means the ability to distinguish one thing from another. It is the capacity to separate truth from illusion, projection from reality, fear from intuition. Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from confusing these things. We mistake anxiety for intuition. We mistake projection for love. We mistake obedience for virtue. Justice cuts through these confusions. The sword is the instrument of consciousness. It does not comfort us. It clarifies us. One of Jung's greatest discoveries was the concept of projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously place parts of ourselves onto other people. We accuse others of being controlling while ignoring our own need for control. We fall deeply in love with qualities that actually belong to our own undeveloped potential. We blame the world for wounds that originated within us. Justice asks us to retrieve these projections. Every time we point the finger outward, justice quietly turns it back toward ourselves, not to create guilt, but to create awareness. True freedom begins when we reclaim what we have unconsciously given away. Justice also stands at the threshold of responsibility. Modern culture often speaks about freedom as the ability to do whatever we want. Jung would likely disagree. Genuine freedom comes only after we become conscious enough to recognize the forces that have been controlling us. Trauma, conditioning, family expectations, unconscious fears, and inherited beliefs all shape our choices. Until these become conscious, we are not truly choosing at all. Justice represents the moment when excuses begin to dissolve. It is not a cruel archetype. It simply reminds us that awareness brings responsibility. Once we see clearly, we cannot pretend we do not know. This is why justice can feel uncomfortable. Most archetypes invite us into mystery or transformation, but justice invites us into accountability. It asks difficult questions. Where are you lying to yourself? Which relationships are based on obligation rather than love? Which dreams have you abandoned because they frightened you? Where have you sacrificed your authenticity in exchange for approval? These questions are rarely easy to answer because the ego has invested years protecting itself from them. Yet, without this confrontation, genuine psychological growth becomes impossible. Justice is closely connected to the shadow. Jung described the shadow as everything we reject, repress, or refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. Many people think the shadow contains only negative qualities, but this is only half the truth. The shadow also contains hidden strengths, creativity, confidence, sexuality, leadership, and joy. Justice invites us to examine not only the darkness we deny, but also the light we have never allowed ourselves to embody. The scales are balanced only when both are recognized. A person who denies their anger becomes passive. A person who denies their vulnerability becomes rigid. A person who denies their gifts remains small. Justice seeks equilibrium, not perfection. Astrologically, justice is associated with Libra, the sign governed by Venus. Many people think of Libra simply as balance or harmony, but its deeper symbolism is the search for right relationship. This includes our relationship with others, but more importantly, our relationship with ourselves. A balanced life is not one without conflict. It is one where our inner values and outer actions reflect each other. Justice teaches that harmony is not created by avoiding tension. It is created by aligning our choices with our deepest truth. There is another important symbol in the Justice card, the throne. Justice is seated. She is not running, reacting, or defending herself. This posture reflects inner stability. Psychological maturity does not mean we never experience difficult emotions. It means we are no longer ruled by them. Justice waits before acting. She observes before concluding. In a world driven by immediate reactions, this is a profound lesson. The mature psyche develops the ability to pause. In that pause, consciousness enters. We stop living automatically and begin responding deliberately. Justice also reminds us that every decision shapes the person we are becoming. Jung often wrote that character is formed through repeated choices. Every time we ignore our conscience, we strengthen one part of the psyche. Every time we act in accordance with our values, we strengthen another. The card, therefore, represents more than a single moment of judgment. It symbolizes an ongoing dialogue between the ego and the self. The self, the organizing center of the entire psyche, constantly invites us toward greater integrity. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we resist. Justice simply reflects the consequences of both. Many spiritual traditions imagine judgment as something that happens after death. Jung saw judgment as a psychological reality that occurs throughout life. The psyche naturally evaluates itself. When we betray ourselves repeatedly, we experience anxiety, emptiness, resentment, or depression. These are not punishments from the universe. They are signals that our inner world has become divided. Likewise, when we begin living authentically, we often experience a growing sense of vitality and meaning. Justice is not rewarding us. It is revealing the natural consequences of psychological alignment. One of the greatest misconceptions about justice is that it demands perfection. It does not. The archetype knows that human beings are flawed. Individuation is not about eliminating imperfection, but becoming conscious of it. Justice asks us to stop pretending, to admit what we fear, to acknowledge what we desire, to recognize where we have caused harm and where we ourselves have been wounded. This honesty is not self-condemnation. It is the foundation of transformation. We cannot integrate what we refuse to see. As we move deeper into the journey of the major arcana, justice marks an important turning point. Earlier cards encourage exploration, creativity, and the discovery of new possibilities. Justice asks what we will do with everything we have learned. Will we continue living unconsciously, repeating inherited patterns? Or will we begin choosing consciously, even when those choices are uncomfortable? This is the moment where psychological adulthood begins. It is not marked by age, status, or achievement. It is marked by integrity. Ultimately, justice teaches that the universe is not merely interested in our happiness, it is interested in our wholeness. Happiness comes and goes, success rises and falls, but integrity remains. When our thoughts, emotions, actions, and deepest values begin moving in the same direction, something remarkable happens. We no longer need to pretend. We no longer need to defend an identity that does not belong to us. We become inwardly balanced, not because life has become easier, but because we have become more truthful. Justice reminds us that the greatest judge we will ever meet is not outside ourselves. It is the quiet voice within that always knows when we are living in alignment with who we truly are. Learning to listen to that voice may be one of the most difficult tasks of the individuation journey, but it is also one of the most liberating, because in the end, justice is not about punishment. It is about becoming whole. Thank you for watching and for joining me on this exploration of the justice archetype. If this perspective resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Rooted in Spirit and turning on notifications so you don't miss future videos. In this series, we'll continue exploring tarot through the lens of Jungian psychology, archetypes, alchemy, mythology, and the symbols that have guided humanity for centuries. If you enjoyed this video, I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which aspect of the justice archetype spoke to you the most? Your reflections help make this community a place for meaningful conversation and shared discovery. Until next time, remember that the greatest journey is the one inward, and every symbol is an invitation to know yourself more deeply. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.